Hello, and I'm Steve Freshwater, your host for this webinar session. I'm delighted to be doing that today. When I'm not hosting webinars, my day job is as Executive Vice President for CapGemini Invent. That's the consulting advisory arm of the CapGemini Group. I'm an engineer by training, and I help clients across all industries with the transformation journeys. And Industry 4.0 and the challenges that are developing through the COVID and pandemic are some of the things that we're helping people navigate to both realize their new vision and a new level of performance. And today I have the pleasure of leading a multidisciplinary team that helps really from strategy right the way through to new business models, ideas into prototypes, and leveraging the realities of 4.0. On the panel today, I'm joined by three guests, and I hope you'll please join me in welcoming them. And they're going to share their experience of digitalisation. I'll come back to that topic in a moment when we'll talk through that. But the first panelist I've got is Shane Eddy. Now, Shane is the Chief Operations Officer of Pratt Whitney. He leads all the business activities related to quality, health and safety, supply chain, manufacturing. So huge responsibility in helping Pratt Whitney to meet their on-time delivery and cost commitments of new engines and spare parts. So a really interesting insight we're going to get from Shane. I'm also joined by Ben Adams. Now, Ben is president of Hanwha Aerospace USA. He's formerly the president and CEO of Raytheon Technologies. We may be more familiar with those. But Hanwha Aerospace purchased EDAC in the back end of last year and creating a new business. And his organisation is interesting because it's also a supplier to Shane and Pratt Whitney. So it'll be interesting to see his perspective of that. But they're involved in supporting the engine of OEMs, with design, manufacturing services, and MRO capabilities. So we'll get to see and hear the perspectives, I think, of customer, supplier, and how they're operating. I'm also joined by Rob Hayes. So Rob is a Senior Business Development Manager with Salesforce. So welcome, Rob. And his passion is helping UK industries really take the Industry 4.0, I think, from hype to real value. I think you and I share that, Rob. Absolutely. I'm sure that's a common theme with the panel. But how do we understand, how do we train people and develop? And now that you joined Salesforce, I think we're going to hear about how the development of one of the world's largest software companies is really helping organizations and taking the cyber and the physical worlds as they converge. So that's our panel. I think we've got an amazing depth of capability at different stages in the journey. And let's start by just having a look at the question. So the question posed was, there are lots of challenges facing logistics, Shane, the complexity of supplier network and the volatility, COVID. If it wasn't hard enough with the global markets and so on, there's massive dynamic in there. How are you at Pratt & Whitney using the kind of new processes, digitisation, and Industry 4.0 to really help deliver, your service and your customer customer experience to your customers?
Yeah, thanks, Steve, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today. Really for I4O at Raytheon Technologies and Pratt Whitney, the goal overall is a common structure and excellence in both business and manufacturing execution. Underpinning all of this is our drive for highly skilled people, robust and common processes, and then leading edge technologies and systems. Now, the volatility of COVID has driven, a significant impact in the commercial end of our business, with demand down sharply, 40 to 50%. Depending on the sector and the region. Our military business, however, remains very strong, and in some cases, we're actually accelerating our production to partially offset this lower demand on the commercial side. Of course, as you know, in our industry, safety and quality are always top focus, and the requirements of the product really define that we have intense processes with, complex and costly capital assets to manufacture them. The data coming off these machines these days is unprecedented. So really all the ingredients are there for a full digital value stream. You've got 3D models coming into these highly engineered processes that are really well controlled with inline verification that can stop or even adapt in flow. So it's really game changing for us. Now, with the COVID downturn, as you might imagine, focus on cost is much more intense, and Industry 4.0 provides the tools for us to adapt. to service demand. And by having lean, automated, and connected cells, we've been able to service this demand with significantly smaller industrial footprint than would have been contemplated 10 years ago. So this lower investment in today's COVID environment, as you might imagine, is even more important for us.
Indeed. And what sort of, I mean, obviously you're a huge company and great assets in that. What are some of the results that you're seeing today, Shane? I mean, you've been on this journey a while, so how's it looking?
Yeah, let me circle right back to safety and our people first in answering that question, Steve. With automation and things like robotic assist, we've been able to engineer some of the toughest assembly challenges when we're putting these large engines together, particularly the cores with the very tight tolerances. We've been able to engineer some of these challenges and really help us increase the safety and when we're putting these engines together. And I think our top quartile performance in environmental health and safety is linked directly to our journey on Industry 4.0. This automation, coupled with real-time problem solving, has driven up yields, and that helps both our on-time delivery and our cost performance. So really, we have all the metrics going in the right direction. By connecting the machines, the people, the networks, and the data to drive visibility, efficiency, quality, and predictability on the shop floor, we've really seen a step change in the productivity in our factories. And as I mentioned earlier, we've already offset hundreds of millions in investment that would have been required otherwise to service the demand that we're facing.
Okay, brilliant. I'll just start. Let's go over to Ben now. Now, Ben, I mentioned in the introductions about Hanwha and the aerospace. Probably worth giving us a bit of an introduction of how that plays into the context of your business and then how are you actually harnessing, as Shane said, how are you harnessing some of these new technologies now?
Okay, thanks, Steve. Yeah, by way of introduction, I'll speak a little bit about Hanwha Aerospace. For those not familiar with the organization, Hanwha Aerospace is headquartered in Changwon, Korea. We service commercial aerospace and defense markets and generate roughly $5 billion annually in revenue with 11,000 employees. The engine focus part of the business is a little bit smaller, generating roughly $2 billion of annual sales with roughly 3,000 employees. And so we have now a really global network of engineering and manufacturing sites. We're headquartered in Changwon, South Korea. We have a site in Vietnam. We have the historic EDAC Technologies, which is primarily based in Connecticut, now operating as Hanwha Aerospace USA. And we actually also have a joint venture with Pratt Whitney in Singapore. And so, you know, within all these businesses, we are making parts. We are assisting with research and development and design initiatives, and most importantly, manufacturing quality parts for the OEMs, specifically Pratt Whitney. Key platforms: NGPF, F-135, LEAP, some GE and Korean government platforms, and yeah, so that's what we've grown into. It's truly a global business. You know, as far as our digital journey, our industrialization 4.0 type of journey, I would say it's a tale of, you know, two geographies. How we've approached it in the U.S., I'm a little bit more familiar with, but I can speak to what we've done in Asia. You know, our business here in the U.S. has been predominantly manufacturing and R&D. Our supply chain is far less complex than Shane's business over at Pratt. The majority of our inputs are coming from a limited number of raw material and hardware providers. So a lot of the value add that we create is in our four walls. So with that said, you know, our digital journey has been primarily to satisfy OEE and safety. So overall equipment effectiveness, Shane touched on some of those elements, and safety as well. With that kind of in mind, the last 3 to 4 years, we've centered our industrialization efforts on, better availability, performance, and yields. To be a little bit more specific there, at least on the machine side, and monitoring the health and accuracy of our machines is paramount to good yield first and foremost, and that is, our characteristic accountability is by far the most important thing that we look to enhance on a daily basis and through these investments. So machine health and accuracy, where we're monitoring, dynamic signals to each axis of 5-axis machines, collecting data using controls and different sensors on those machines. We're setting a lot of our tools offline using smart tool holders, RFID, and consumption strategies that are embedded in the tools themselves. We've got fixture libraries we've set up digitally to help with, designing across the business for uniformity and ease of setup, and generally focus a little bit less on automation here in the U.S. and more automation, just making it really simple for our operators to perform. And then getting real-time SPC run charts available to the operator. We've had a lot of success in where we've pulled this digital vision together, or this, early stage digital vision together, be specifically in our IBR business. We've seen tremendous benefit in safety, employee satisfaction, but also outputs, yields. We've grown that business by 30% a year over the past 3 to 4 years. We're hitting our cost profiles, and in generally making a step change in quality with the visibility right at the operator in terms of statistical process control. We have a number of those investments throughout the business, different cells where we've painted that same digital footprint, and they're all performing really well.
Okay, you mentioned it's a tale of two geographies, so that's the kind of US. Your Korean counterpart, how's that, or the main Hanwha business? I mean, how are they adopting these new technologies?
Well, from my view, they're farther advanced than we've been here in the U.S. in the traditional EDAC technologies. So it's been, like I said, a tale of two approaches where the U.S. business, we were early on in our journey converting from a job shop to a high production manufacturing environment. And so, we were really focused on the point of creation. That was our motto. Can we get a good digital view of what's happening at the point of creation, at the machine, where the tool is hitting the metal? And so more product, less system, and constellation of a digital network. I think, what surprised me on my first journey over to visit Hanwha, in the campus in Changwon, they had a tremendous smart factory, which was something that I hadn't seen in aerospace. Typically, the shops I've been in were run like the historic EDAC Technologies, which was a little bit more capacity and product driven. But in their Changwon Smart Factory, not only were they using the elements of product discipline and visibility in that digital piece, but also overlaying just a tremendous amount of RFID and automation. So I talked about in the U.S., it's more about automation. One man is okay operating 4 machines, 3 machines. In Changwon and in that smart factory, there was much more efficiency from a labor utilization perspective. A lot of it was being run by RFID, whether it be fixture locations, movement of equipment, movement of tools, and also just inventory management. And then so you got a good product piece, which is not dissimilar to what we'd been doing in the U.S., overlaid with this really good control of an RFID network. And then they started to use, different systems and processes to extrapolate that data using IoT and come up with predictive outcomes, right? And so I think, their journey is farther along than ours, but, we'll be working together to share best practices, across borders, because I think what they've done from an automation standpoint is, commendable and really successful. And I think we've implemented some really good product in machine health monitoring systems here in the U.S. that will also benefit our teams in Asia.
Okay, brilliant. Well, we'll come back to that journey. Interested to get a perspective perhaps on the different both supplier and cultural differences. So, Rob, thank you, Ben. Rob, you're part of Salesforce, one of the world's largest, as I mentioned, software companies. You've recently been on the acquisition trail. I think many of us will know you from CRM solutions and the customer data and so on, with things like MuleSoft integration, now Tableau analytics and visualization. But both Ben and Shane talked about data and the importance of that information of sharing. What are you seeing? What are you seeing in your world at the moment, and what are the big strategies to deal with digitalisation?
Yeah. Thanks, Steve, and kind of pleasure to be here today. I think one of the things that we're seeing with our customers, and one of the things that we're seeing in the market around digitalisation, digital transformation, Industry 4.0, that there's lots of kind of lexicon to describe these things, is that with the current situation around the pandemic, we have seen an uptake and an acceleration in certain areas. So organisations are starting to see that what might have been kind of ethereal and esoteric paradigms, actually they need to start getting on with these things. And actually some of that realization with how different geographies are approaching it. So to Ben's point, I think if you look at the different geos, they have very mature industrial strategies, and a lot of that is orientated around high-end manufacturing and automation. So we're definitely seeing customers realizing that they need to accelerate, but actually for mature organizations in mature markets, it's doing it in bite-sized chunks where there's quick time to value, there's quick ROI, and also in a way that takes account of some of the existing investment that those mature organizations have in existing technologies. In a lot of cases, we often see mainframe as a kind of source of information and design intent that's often feeding these factories and these facilities. So how can I do that with and enable and maximize my existing investments? One of the areas at the moment with the current pandemic that we're seeing a big acceleration in and an awareness is kind of changing the engagement with that supply chain, with the drop in rate, with the drop in production, specifically in civil, how that then propagates through that supply chain. So there needs to be a much more collaborative and partnership relationship between the system integrators, the OEMs, the tier ones, and down. And with that, one of the things we do see, at one end of the spectrum, you can have a paradigm where you've got full connectivity. I've got EDI, I've got IoT coming from machines at my tier 2 supplier and feeding up. But actually, at the other end of the spectrum, how can I create a more collaborative environment with my suppliers? So one of the things that we're doing with customers is leveraging technology to create those collaborative environments. So create communities where you can start to share the information, share change notes across the supply chain, share changes in rates, and actually have a two-way conversation around that. So we have a lot of customers where, with the current situation, actually they have to go out and renegotiate some of those agreements. They have to change what they had locked in some of those long-term agreements. So they're having to have two-way conversations that they didn't have to have 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago. And we have one customer, oil and gas space, where actually they're bringing together about 9 existing different back-end systems of record and surfacing that data in a controlled way and working with the supply chain. So they've found that by proactively sharing more information around demand, around rate, they could actually get that two-way conversation with the supply chain and over a more proactive conversation that they could have with that supply chain.
Okay.
And I think just to close off on that question, I think the other thing that we see as Salesforce, to your point, Steve, what it says on the tin and what we're known for is originally around that kind of front office, around Salesforce automation, around the customer relationship management. What we're seeing now, complementing the increase in the drive for higher margin service contracts and that drive around the availability contracts, actually joining up a lot of the themes and the topics that we've talked about so far with that front office piece. So at the other end of it, there is going to be a customer, there's going to be a service level agreement. And interestingly for me, when I look at how some of the, specifically defense organizations, they're getting measured on CSAT scores, so customer satisfaction scores and net promoter scores, which were the domain of kind of the consumer world. That's how the MOD in the UK, that's how the DoD is starting to interact and engage with industry. So kind of bringing in that customer-centric piece is starting to accelerate as well.
Yeah, indeed. Well, thank you. I mean, it's a really interesting perspective. We'll come back to some of those points in a moment. But you raised the commentary around greater partnerships and relationships, and I guess Shane, Ben, your customer supplier, you're part of a strong ecosystem and you're reliant on each other. Shane, what are the things that you're looking for in your supplier base and customer? What are your expectations? And I'll come to you, Ben, and ask the other way around actually in a moment about what do you need from your customers to help you in that relationship. But
yeah, I guess Steve, I would start by saying we see an environment where this excellence and execution is pervasive, regardless of whether the manufacturing is internal or external to Pratt Whitney. So, said differently, we certainly wouldn't expect our suppliers to do something that we weren't doing, but we want to see this moving, in parallel as we're ramping up our I4O journey. We've really gone back. It's helpful to look at other industries maybe that are further ahead than aerospace on this journey. So we've really looked at automotive as the example of where you have this whole, digital model flowing through process to the floor, that really the supply chain connected from end to end, starting with the customer all the way through the supply chain and the logistics to just-in-time delivery, and really ensuring that the right part with the right quality is in the right place at the right time. So we've actually onboarded talent specifically from the automotive industry, and we're really, that talent's helping us accelerate and shape our journey forward. We do have, as Rob mentioned, this two-way data exchange now through a dedicated portal with suppliers, where things like schedule and some tech data is being shared. What's exciting now is that we're really ramping up on model-based design and flowing the models through to the supplier directly into their factories. As Ben mentioned, with the high-tech capability in Singapore and with Hanwha and other suppliers, this is really taking hold. I think what's exciting is in some of these areas like Singapore and Montreal and Connecticut, we're doing this with help and support from the local governments. In Connecticut, for example, we're working with the Innovation Fund on this model-based engineering process flow, doing that in conjunction with the state and with the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology. So really a lot happening there.
Really interesting around that supplier expectations and so on. I think what we're seeing is CapGemini, and I think it plays to Rob as well, is in our survey post-COVID, is many of the people have tried, have hoped to have these things in place to get visibility, and others are really scrambling right now and setting up war rooms. And so if you've got a plan, and I think it's one of the kind of urgencies of getting a plan to what are your key control points in your supply chain, and make sure you've got pure visibility of that. It's a don't wait right now and get that in place, because that will really enable you to respond to that dynamic, reallocate. We have one of our automotive customers has, I won't say exactly the number, but many thousands of products that are nearly complete. And, just that visibility of parts where they come in a global distance. Have they got, and as they're building the visibility of the operation, really gives them a chance to see how do they close that out and fulfill the customer demand as it comes back. So really important. Ben, obviously you're on the other side of the equation, which is the supplier side. you're looking at your customers and so on, which include Pratt Whitney. What are you seeing, and what are the areas that you can help and build upon that?
So first of all, touching back on the topic where we paid into digital piece over our IBR manufacturing line, there is an element of what Pratt's done that really helped us. So I'll mention that Pratt a while back established a very thorough process to review some really complex characteristics using PW airfoil, and so there's some commonality on how we approach whether some of the hardest parts are right first time, and meeting Pratt's design requirements and getting that feedback. So that's a really good interface for us, and it's been very helpful in us establishing our rhythms in that business. I would say also, and Shane mentioned it, bringing in talent. Obviously, we may not be bringing in all the talent from the automotive world, but we do a lot of joint lean events. So where Pratt and Whitney and or other OEMs and our team at Hanwha get together and look at bottlenecks and map that out. And I think the more we think about it and eliminating bottlenecks from a digital perspective with a digital solution, I think we'll learn from each other. And obviously, we've got a bit bigger network at Hanwha globally now, so I think there'll be some good learnings there. The model-based definition that Shane mentioned, for us, that's big. There are some opportunities we see that don't have models that we would just pass on altogether, just because the engineering requirements or having to create the model and going through that process can be tedious for low volume applications. So having model-based definition right up front, speeds up our estimating process. It speeds up our fixture design. It speeds up our capital acquisition process and making sure we have a really good view of what's going to be required. So model-based definition is huge in terms of our ability to go faster. And then, for me, I think my challenge to support Pratt and the other OEMs is to build and continue to refine the customer interface, where we generally rely on, Pratt systems to receive, schedule, make commitments. I think there's another element in time that will be created to give them more visibility to outcomes and to enhance our communication, which this is all, based on. So we'll see where that goes, but I think those are the areas, that I'm excited about working with the OEMs.
Brilliant. Rob, that must be music to your ears to hear things around customer triggers and getting customer information to drive production. I mean, what are your reflections on that, and how are you preparing yourselves for that big push?
Yeah, no, I think it's really kind of interesting to hear, and I think the whole conversation so far is kind of aligned with what we're and it would be with what we're seeing with the market, and that closer interface between supplier and customer. And for us, customer is anyone upstream or downstream of you that you're receiving or giving value to. And I think just building on that a little bit into some of the points that have been made so far, and this does reflect some of the different the maturity of different geographies as well. But certainly, if I look at some of the Western environments, mature brownfield sites, mature brownfield investments, lots of mergers and acquisitions. When you get to the shop floor, we get into the back-end systems of record. There's actually quite a heterogeneous environment. So there's different investments. I was at a automotive facility in China a few years ago where they were starting from scratch, and even there they had different MES systems running the different plants and facilities. So augmented on top of that, we do see lots of different investments, different ERP, different MES, and what we're doing at the moment, and kind of something that we've which is the acquisition of Tableau has been a very important part of the portfolio recently, is that we're doing a lot of work with customers where they can start to aggregate together these different data points from these different systems of record and actually feed that into a classic S&OP process, so sales and operations planning. So often you have different tribes on the demand side to the supply side, whether that supply is internal or external. And it's how do you bring these, both the different tribes together, but also the different data points to get a much better consolidated view across the supply and demand that can then enable you to run your facilities much more efficiently. And we're seeing a lot of exceptional S&OP processes and cycles going on at the moment to react to the current situation. And, within aerospace and probably in defense, where these cycles are maybe once a quarter or once a half, depending on how far out they were looking, actually they're having to react very quickly to do that. So, and that's something that the Tableau and MuleSoft can be leveraged for to get to an answer very quickly, or start to get better visibility very quickly, without having to lift and shift and consolidate the different back-end systems into a big monolithic beast. And we have customers. There's one specifically in the medical device space that I can touch on, where they had 9 different ERP systems at the back end, different MRP. And they were very quickly able to use Tableau to create that consolidated view. And within a kind of 12-month period, it meant that they were able to optimize inventory, working capital, and take 60+ million of kind of cost out of the business by getting that visibility. So I think it's kind of an important time, and it's in a time where we're very keen to be working with organizations through the current situation, and also to Ben's point and Shane's earlier, then opening up those kind of front office and customer centric engagement points where it's probably not been a traditional domain and investment area within these sectors.
Indeed, and a really interesting sort of parallels there. I was intrigued by a comment, I think, that Shane, you made about your learning from automotive, and I'm intrigued about the audience that are listening to this this webinar are largely aerospace and defence, and I think I guess from your perspectives, what would be the one thing that you could share with other organisations to say the A&D in this regard are really strong at, and therefore the exemplars? So sit up automotive, come and listen to some of these things. Is that do anyone want to start? Shane, have you got a view on that, about something you're really focused on?
Yeah, well, I think, when we look at this overall journey, Steve, I mean, one thing that we can't forget is that the most critical and valuable asset that we have in the business is our people. And so really getting your people tuned to the, to the journey and to the value add opportunity, I think is key up front. I think Rob mentioned Tableau, getting the ability, there's so much data inherent in the manufacturing process and just the overall supply chain now, that getting that data in a visualized form where actual, individuals at the point of contact, where value's being added, whether it be on the manufacturing floor or in the supply chain, can actually use that data to do their work. It's really improving the productivity, and quite honestly, taking some of the frustration out of dealing with this. At Pratt Whitney, we've always had an incredible, I'll say, entrepreneurial spirit around both the technology of the product and the technology of the manufacturing to make the product. You couple that now with the new generation coming in, which have really grown up with digital and connected laced in everything of their everyday lives. Put those two things together with some of the technology that's coming down the road in terms of analytics, and eventually this artificial intelligence, and who knows where we're going to be in 5 years.
Indeed. Okay. Ben, same question to you, I guess, about what can A&D sector, your business, sort of share with others in terms of a key practice, if you like.
Well, I would say agility within the system. I think the automotive systems are generally a little bit more rigid, but given the mix shifts and design changes that we see, and performance improvement across all the OEMs, we do see a lot of change within the needs of our customers. And so we've got to be cognizant that we design systems in digital networks that create more agility in the system and not less agility in the system. So for me, I would say that's something that that industry could maybe take away from ours. I also think, at least in the last 4 to 5 years across our market in general, there's been an accelerated amount of deal making, mergers and acquisitions, and we're probably faced with generally a supply chain that's on a lot of different networks and digital platforms. For example, with Hanwha, we're operating two here in the Hanwha Aerospace USA, a third in Korea, at least on the ERP side, a bunch of other digital platforms. So leveraging, the Tableaus of the world and other, I guess, good data consolidation platforms, as well as eventually moving and consolidating some of these main systems is painful but rewarding. And I would say generally, the aerospace and defense market, the focus, at least in the supply chain, has been on product capacity and the deal making and the digital kind of platforms will need to catch up essentially because it's there's been so much pressure to keep up with the NGPF volumes, the LEAP volumes, the F-135 volumes, that we've put aside some of the network needs of the business.
Okay, brilliant. Rob, just your thoughts on the same question?
Yeah, I think just to emphasise a couple of the points that were made. I think talent is probably one of the big ones, and I think of the current position in time that we're at with additive, with hybrid manufacturing, with all the digital things that we've been talking about. Actually, what was a manufacturing engineer, a design engineer, those roles are going to evolve and change as we go forward. And I think that the talent pool that exists and the historical investment in training and nurturing that capability, I think the kind of aerospace and defence sector is second to none on that. So I think that's something that's really key. And I think the agility. I think there's probably been a bit of a wake-up call in the most recent past to return to some of that agility that was at the heart of the sector originally. I think specifically within civil, there was big, long outlooks on back orders and backlogs, and actually some of that's going to change and evolve. And actually, there's probably great opportunity. So everyone assumes that an autonomous vehicle is going to be on the roads. Actually, it could be the aviation sector, and probably will be, that starts to take over that. So I think that agility is going to really come to the fore and progress the sector forwards.
Okay, brilliant. And I guess that's as we come towards the end of the session now, it'd be good to kind of get your reflections. Imagine we've just jumped in a spaceship. We've gone into the future. It's 5 years hence. What would be the key advances that you're seeing across this? The big key capabilities that have made a difference to you. I mean, clearly talent is one of those, and a component of that. But Shane, is there anything from your perspective that you'd be expecting to see?
Okay, yeah, no, I could take this one first. So again, I go back to that customer interface. I think we've enhanced that significantly. I think at least within our business, we've got integrated networks throughout Korea, Vietnam, Singapore, the U.S., in alignment on the digital strategy and sharing best practices. So we've advanced that over 5 years. I think there's an element of I think it's shown up in other industries and maybe somewhat in aerospace, certainly not in our current business, but some virtual reality training, right? As we develop processes in some of these technical centers, how do we distribute that efficiently throughout the globe? So I think that could start to take hold within our business, within our factories. We'll be linking up more production processes to these established flexible manufacturing systems we have. So whether we're running just milling and turning machines now, we'll figure out ways to get, inspection, clean, deburr, assembly, automated, and more autonomous than it is today. And then, another thing that's really critical for us to figure out ways to enhance is within computer-aided manufacturing systems, that when you do things in a virtual environment, that they actually show up the same way at the machine or in a digital environment, to make sure that there's predictability and outcomes as it relates to offline work, and then matching that outcome on the machine, essentially. So that's not only important for our efficiency, it's important for our OEM productivity, and it's important for our general digital journey. So I think that's another element that we should advance here in 5 years.
Okay. Shane, have does that chime in terms of those kind of key things that you'll be seeing?
Yeah, I think that resonates, Steve. Along with maybe a higher performing internet. Again, I apologize for the connection issue here. What I might add to that is we talk about the model-based design, but really in our industry, there's as much data coming off the end product in use today as there is data being added as we're manufacturing it. So model-based enterprise, this entire digital thread that follows the life of the part from the raw material and the inspection that we put in, even at the raw material level, all the way through to the full life of the component. I think this is really an area where aviation is, aerospace and defense is maybe, on the edge or a little ahead. And I think really something that we'll see a lot more of as we, as you roll forward 5 and 10 years from now.
Okay, brilliant, Shane. And Rob, your thoughts about 5 years hence?
Yeah, I think just to kind of agree with some of the comments that have been made so far, but maybe just to kind of bring it up a level. Certainly, from my perspective, if I look back to when I started my career, if you wanted to be at the edge of kind of technology and everything that was associated with it, you went into the aerospace and defence sector. I think there's been a lot of competition from kind of technology and people in that software world, but actually it's kind of bringing aerospace and defense back to the forefront of where we want to attract the talent to. And I think there's a perfect convergence to going all the way back to the start of that kind of cyber and physical world. And actually the aerospace and defense sector is the one where it kind of converges the most. So kind of bringing it back to the place that the talent out of the universities comes to first. And I think the opportunity is there now.
Brilliant. So there's a kind of big message about talent and I think coming through and an exciting place to be. Now, all these great possibilities of technology, there are some risks and there's some concerns around that. What are your thoughts about the things, some of the concerns that you've got and what things are you putting in place, I guess, to mitigate some of those things? I don't know, Shane, is that, what are you seeing in terms of, obviously, apart from high internet speed and so on, what are some of the security aspects?
Yeah, just to say that, cybersecurity has to be top of mind. It's something that Pratt Whitney and Raytheon Technologies take very seriously. Digitization only amplifies these concerns. It brings additional systems and applications into the environment. So ensuring that we have a strong cybersecurity backbone. And I think our team is doing, great things in this area. And I think we're really ready not only to meet our high standards for digitization across the enterprise, but also standards being flowed down by, key customers like the U.S. Department of Defense. So it's going to be a critical element going forward. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, keeping control of the data and the firewall. How about yourself, Ben? Does that resonate again? Or
absolutely. Those are all flow down requirements. So what Shane and the team at Pratt are experiencing, it's flowing down to the tier 1s and tier 2s as well. So yeah, we've got to make sure we can adhere to the changing restrictions and protocols that Pratt flows down to us. That starts with kind of CMMC level 3. We're keeping our eye on that, and just general governance around the digital. We've got IT, folks. We've got really smart people in our business that want to make the right changes, that want to use different platforms and enhance our digital footprint. And we've just got to have good governance around what's going to be acceptable and what's not. So there's the safety net in terms of cybersecurity and restrictions, but I think up front we've got to have a good governance process just to make sure we're all aligned in what risk we cannot take and make sure that appropriate due diligence is completed on any major change in the business.
Okay, brilliant. And I guess same question to you, Rob. We talked about talent earlier and data and so on. What do you see as the big risks?
So I think some of the risk is probably right bang in between the kind of previous two comments, and I think it's it's one end of the spectrum having too much governance, and at the other end of the spectrum being gung ho on it, and actually it's getting back to that right balance, so we can get back to that agility that if you think of the investments and the advancements that happened post Second World War, etc., there was a lot of agility and drive to get the things done. So it's getting the right balance, but absolutely conscious of the requirements and the flow down from the different departments and different customers around the security piece. And I think part of the danger is if we don't get that right balance, then some of the other geos that do have civil aviation and defense at the top of their industrial strategy and are investing heavily in some of the automation techniques, then there's a danger that they'll start to overtake. So it's kind of getting that right balance, I think.
Okay, brilliant. Just on the, I guess as we head to the final question, really, which is, we know from the audience that are watching this that some of them are quite ahead on the journey, some of them are just thinking about beginning it, and I guess to the extent to which everyone on this call is at a different point in the journey and thinking about it, it's just really cool to get your view about, where you're starting out again, where what's your one piece of advice or key message to people listening into this to take forward. Shane, do you want to start on that perspective?
Yeah, I just I circle back around on our people as being the most important ingredient, overall. And I think Rob talked about how, talent has always migrated to aerospace and defense. What we're doing on the product technology side is clearly cutting edge. And so, ensuring that you've got, the right training in place, and that you're tapping into really the expertise of your people to fuel the Industry 4.0 journey, I think, is just from the start. It's a key thing that can't be overlooked or underestimated. This agility that we have as I'll say a relatively low rate industry compared to some others, but with really high capability, high technology products, it's all about our people and helping them grow and growing with them.
So factoring that into your plan, factoring and thinking about how the automation isn't necessarily going to replace it, but it's going to augment and build capabilities. I guess that's a key point for anyone starting the journey.
Absolutely.
Okay. And Ben, same question to you. Your top tips of somebody thinking about this?
Yeah, I think our journey, which started here in the U.S., which I can speak to more accurately, our journey was successful. I think our automation approach, not jumping straight to, full automation was right. From our perspective, you're not looking to eliminate all the labor. You're just make, setups and run processes simple, repeatable, and focus on the digital communication between operators and supervisors and management, and then jump into autonomy and IoT when ready. Obviously, we get the leverage being part of the Hanwha network now. And then I think the thing, reflecting back on this, which could have made it could have advanced, our push into digitalization more, is just making sure it's part of the budget, right? For us, we think about machine tools, we think about fixtures, but how is digital transformation part of the budget, and make sure that's aligned and that it's very specific in what the initiatives are for the year. Over the past 5 years, I think we could have done a better job of that. I think Hanwha over in Korea and globally has done a really good job at that. So certainly we're going to make sure we keep an eye on the budget and allocate the appropriate funds to enhance our digital networks.
Okay. That's brilliant. I think part of the budget, I think I should take that one forward. I think it's a good phrase. There's tons of experimentation going on there, but thinking with the end in mind and scaling it up is going to be really important for those people out there doing that. Thank you, Ben. And Rob, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think, again, agree with the comments, and just feeding into that. I think when I look back, and I've probably been on many sides of the fence, from working in industry through to kind of consulting organizations and software organizations. I think for me, it's getting the kind of magic three is the process and the lean piece with the technology, but also with creative as well. And if you kind of get the balance wrong between those three, then you can end up going off down a bit of a rabbit hole. But I think bringing all those together can help, for example, it can help accelerate understanding what the value is that you're going to get to, with the increase in the data points that are coming off the machines and that are available. What can I do with that data? People often have big data lakes, but what am I going to do with it? So I think kind of bringing those three together to create a balance, and how you can then let the talent use that to help progress is something that I'd probably have pushed on a lot more in my earlier days.
Brilliant. Okay, well, listen, we'll wrap now, and thank you so much for taking the time out to share your experiences. I think we've got some great insights about, wherever you are on the journey, the role of people, the role of data, getting it on the budget. I think was a thing that I take forward. I think automation is a new word that I should be using around that, and I think it's just exciting times as well. I think in the aerospace defence industry. Really well said by Shane and Rob and Ben. This is an exciting industry to be in. There are lessons to be learnt from automotive and other consumer products and so on. But actually, it's an exciting time. The training and the development that one gets around that dealing with quite a volatile market. I think there's some really great movements in this, and I would encourage people to watch this webinar. I'd also ask them to raise questions, because I think there'll be an opportunity to get specific questions answered as we go through. So, gentlemen, thank you, and really great to meet you virtually. Look forward to seeing you again, perhaps next year, face to face in Farnborough next time. But super, have a great day, and look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. Take care.